Welcome back to the lab with your host, Brad Bolt. Welcome back to the lab. Back to the lab. Welcome back to the lab. Back to the lab.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Brad Bolt Show. Today we are looking at the East in our division previews, and joining me again this week, my good friend, the birthday boy, JR, John Roberts. How are we, Johnny?
Tried to sneak it past you, couldn't do it, obviously.
Couldn't do it.
But no, wouldn't rather be doing anything else tonight than talking AFC East, NFC East, some exciting divisions.
Yeah, these could be potentially, you could end up having, with the way that the season plays out, you could have, in theory, the two Super Bowl teams coming from these two divisions this year with the quality of teams that we have going in there. So I think what we'll do is we started AFC last week on our first. We'll start NFC first this week. So kicking it off with America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys over-under is 9.5 wins. So, first thoughts, John, 9.5. Are you thinking over or under for that?
I mean, I've got to go over with the 9.5 there. That's just not enough for the Cowboys. I think that they're a fairly complete team. I mean, what did they lose at the end of last year? Really, in essence, we're thinking about it's Kellen Moore, the coach. So sure, the offensive coordinator is a big one. But outside of that, they lose Zeke, but is that really a loss? They're leaning on Tony Pollard probably more than I would like them to. I would preferably like them to add some depth there at running back. Whether they do that or not, we'll see. But bringing in Brandon Cooks, I think it's a great addition. Obviously, we saw what happened once they lost Amari Cooper, and it's like, we could really use Amari Cooper. Was the thought sentiment last season. They've just signed Zach Martin, so he's going to be a happy boy. I think that there's a lot to like. They've brought in Stephon Gilmore as well. Mostly positive. I don't see for what reason they would take such a step back as they have over the last few years, outside of obviously the coaching change. What about yourself?
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines. Well, like you said, it's Zeke Elliott, it's Connor McGovern are the only two real major outs. The part where they seemed like, I guess you could say, the most, I don't know, lacking, for that's not even the right term for it, but where they needed to improve probably more was probably that second cornerback position. Right. And now you've got an all-pro in Stephon Gilmore. Yes, he's not quite the New England Patriots version, but he's still a really good player. And you pair him with Trayvon Diggs, they've just got so much talent and depth. So all over the place. I mean, I guess you lose Dalton Schultz as well.
Yeah.
But you replace him with Luke Schoonmaker. You've got Jake Ferguson there. Peyton Hendershot's there. So you've got that there. And I think the other main part where they were sort of maybe needing to improve was defensive tackle. And they shored that up too by going with Marzi Smith in the first round as well. So when you actually look at that Dallas team, there isn't too many holes. And like you said, bringing in Brandon Cooks, you're expecting hopefully this year a better year if you're a Cowboys fan for Michael Gallup, because it's the year after the ACL. So it's the year after the year after, and this is usually when you see the improvement. So when you just look at that team all around, there's not too many real holes that you can find there.
And Dalton Schultz is a really great call. I like that because, like, obviously Dak loves to throw to his tight ends, and he's very favorable of that kind of a scheme. But like, is Dalton Schultz, like, let's think about it. Is that really a loss? Is that really such a huge loss? Like, he lost Jaden Witten in his sort of later years, of course, but it was still Jaden Witten, and he was still making him viable. Like, I think that these tight ends, these new ones that they brought in, like Luke Schoonmaker, is really gonna I think they're gonna slot in nicely. I don't see it as such a huge pivot.
No, and I think, as you said, probably now if there was a spot where you might be looking and you'd want maybe a slight improvement, would probably be that second running back, that running back depth. Yeah, we saw in the preseason, we saw a bit of Juice Vaughn. He did all right, but
but let's be real.
Rico Dowdle and that Malik, they didn't really do a lot to
Yeah.
sort of, at least last year, you sort of went, okay, we know that Zeke's going to start, but you saw Tony Pollard come on, and then it's just who's going to be in essence, who's going to take on that Tony Pollard type of role this year that comes out of nowhere that really gets everyone going, okay, yeah, this is a really good team.
Can I ask you on Tony Pollard? Do you see him? I don't expect him to play all 17 games. Do you see him playing 12 games?
Yes.
Like, where do you draw the line? 13, 14? Like, what are we talking here?
Look, I think he could potentially play the 17 games, but I think it would be more like towards that back end of the season, like especially if they.
But no running back play 17 games.
No, but what I'm more so thinking was that like the way that they might do it is say you get to week 14 and for some reason week 14 rolls around and it's okay, maybe let's not give him a game off, but maybe let's play him for a couple drives here and there, but that's it. Like,
Seahawks.
But just sort of, but if they've wrapped up a playoff spot, division title sort of thing. Now I know everyone would want the number one seed, so that
right.
Me saying this, they might not happen at all, but you could see potentially that towards that back end of the year, depending on how the seeding plays out, that maybe that's where they might try and find him some rest and just recharge him ready for the playoffs.
And just before we get into the draft, just talk about the schedule and the 9.5 that you're talking about. Okay, so they open with the Giants. That's going to be a huge game. They play the Jets. That'll be a big game as well. Then they play the Cardinals, the Patriots, the 49ers, Chargers, Rams, Eagles, Giants. So they've got a tough division, but then it's like Panthers. Like, there are so many winnable games in there.
Yeah.
Play the Lions at some point as well. They've got a tough one against the Bills and the Dolphins as well. So it's funny, we're talking about the AFC East and the NFC East, and they play each other. So we'll have to reference that. But I don't see there being 6 losses in their schedule. Or 7.
I think too, the way that the season could play out, you could tell me that they could win 16 games and I probably wouldn't be surprised. You could tell me they win 11 games and I probably wouldn't be surprised. To me, they seem like that sort of team who could vary in that range so far. But I guess the big question overall is Mike McCarthy.
Right.
How's his coaching, his play calling, how's that going to affect the team moving forward? So I think that will probably be, for me, the main question that I would have for this team moving forward. So
cool.
With your, where did you place them in your division ranks? Do you have an idea come the end of the season? What do you think?
So I'm very bullish on the Cowboys this season. I've actually got them winning the division. Now I need to actually bring up my actual record that I have for them. Actually, no, that's not true. I have the Eagles still winning the division at 13-4. I've got the Cowboys at 11-6, which is not too far over that 9.5. But I think that they're going to be okay. I think the only other thing is I'm not very high on the Giants. Spoiler alert for future, but I still think that they're going to be very competitive. I don't see any reason why they would take such a step back.
I think too. My other thing is I'm sort of torn between Philly and Dallas I sort of had them both around that same sort of.
Yeah, but can you see Philly taking a step back? I can't.
I guess it's just going to be the defense off it. Like, the defense last year had 70 sacks.
Yeah,
last year.
So sustainable.
And they added a lot of talent, but they did lose a big piece in Javon Hargrave, who we'll get to at some stage. But I think the other thing that sometimes might cause I don't know if it's a hesitancy, but no one's won back-to-back division championships for this division for, was it like 20 odd years or something?
Yeah, something like that. And that's a fair point.
So that would be my only thing. But you mentioned the New York Giants just before, so we'll move on to them. Their win total is 7.5. So what have you got for them?
Under. I've got under the Giants. And I loved it, Brian Dable. Don't get me wrong. I've got the Giants at 4-13, which doesn't make a lot of sense because actually the way this is actually tracked out is I've got them going 0-6 in the division, which is almost not possible. I don't think that's ever really, like, when was the last time that ever happened? And then honestly, they're not that bad of a team, but I am just not very bullish on them at all. Um, the Daniel Jones contract, it's not a good one. It's not team friendly in the way that like Geno Smith, who signed his at the same time, is very team friendly. Their receivers, there's no star. The star right now is Darren Waller is getting the hype in training camp, and to the point where they were saying that they had to get Daniel Jones to stop throwing him to the ball and to take him off the field because he was doing it too much. Let's look at these starting receivers. I'm looking at our lads. It's Paris Campbell, Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, and they brought in Jalen Hylett. Sterling Shepard's still there, and they got Wan'Dale Robinson. So what is going on in this depth chart where we can't even make out the stars from the starters?
And I think the problem too is you look at that receiving core, and so many, even Darren Waller included, so many of these guys were injury prone. Suffered injuries last year. So Sterling Shepard he was an ACL last year, and I think it was, and the year before was like an Achilles.
Yep, he's very injured.
He's been very injured. Darius Slayton, like you said, he's there. He was going to, it seemed like last year, in August last year, he was about to be cut from the team. He only ended up hanging around because they had 3 significant injuries. And they're like, well, you're the only guy we've got left who's a healthy receiver. Last year, they had Richie James, who they signed as their punt returner, was playing significantly. And like you said, Isaiah Hodgins is on the team. He was only picked up because he was on the Buffalo Bills practice squad and knew the offense.
Yeah, knew Brian Table in the offense. He was like, I need you to come here now.
So, I mean, I feel like if they can get a little bit healthier, that would be a massive improvement for them. As you said, Darren Waller was a trade partner. Bobby Okereke was another one who's come across as a linebacker from Indy. Yeah. So I like him. You mentioned Jalen Hyatt as their draft pick. They also
the other linebacker from Detroit, Amani Owarie, as well, has come across.
Yeah, you got Deontay Banks, who they took in the first round, traded up to get. I liked him coming out of the draft. Who else was there anyone else that you liked from their draft that they picked up?
Not so much the draft. Can we I don't mean to single out Saquon Barkley, but I feel like we haven't actually talked about this in any capacity.
No, we haven't.
This $11 million contract, what is it? What's the point in it? For me, would he not have been better off staying on the franchise tag? Because if they re-sign him, they have to pay him whatever the franchise tag is, and then some. And then if they do it for a third year in a row, it's the franchise tag and then some and then some and then some. Is it not?
So if he was on the franchise tag and he played this season on the franchise tag, it's the figure of the top 5 running backs, their average salary combined. Then I believe if he got franchise tagged again next year, it would jump by about whatever the value was, plus about 50% or something.
Yeah, times 5 or times 0.5 or something like that.
Yeah. So, and then I think once you have the 2 tags, then that's it. You can't be tagged for a third time. I don't think.
Is he happy with that? Is everyone happy? Is this a happy offense? I don't know. I know Daniel Jones is happy.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. His off season, the storyline, him wanting obviously to be paid that little bit more, how that all played out. I wonder how much that might affect the his season and things like that, to try and make sure that he can secure that contract for the following year, and whether they do that or if he does end up walking, because he is a massive part of their offense. They need him to play well to be successful.
That's it. He's so much of their offense. And just to bring it back to the schedule again, I listed off for the Cowboys. Giants schedule is not too dissimilar, and they're playing the AFC East, and it's not going to be easy for them in the way that we talk about it. For the Cowboys, who should be able to pull out some victories, I don't see it falling the Giants' way this year.
And one of the things that I wonder too is for Giants fans. So I've got a few Giants fans in my life who I know. One of the big things was, so last year Daniel Jones, he didn't have his 5th-year option picked up, so he played on contract year, did so well. Now that he's the guy who's been paid that big massive contract this year, that extension, if he doesn't have that great a year, what's that going to do for the team? Right. The team, because you've sunk, like you said, they've sunk a fair bit of money into him. It's not as team friendly as Geno Smith's type of deal. So how much is that going to affect them if he doesn't live up to playing in that same way that he did last year? Now, granted, As we said, so many injuries last year. He only threw for about 15 touchdowns for the entire season. So
Yeah.
I would expect him to actually have more touchdowns this year just with healthy players. But
Yeah, do you? Okay.
I would expect him to because, I mean, that's I wouldn't be, as you said, he's targeting Darren Waller so much. If Darren Waller plays 15 games this year, Darren Waller might have 27 touchdowns. It feels like the way, like you said, with how much he's being targeted.
Well, I'm not drafting him enough in fantasy then.
Yeah, it just feels like that because, as you said, if they're having to take him off the field in practice so other guys can have the ball thrown to them,
Yeah.
he's going to get peppered with targets this year. So,
Yeah.
any other thoughts on the Giants before we move on?
Just to finish this schedule as well. Eagles, Rams, sure. Eagles. And then playoffs. Like, come on, man. Like, yeah. They go to the Saints, they play the Packers at some point, Patriots. It's not an easy schedule through and through. I would love, maybe somewhere in their thought process, they figured like, hey, it's not like even if we got Devontae Adams to come into our team, would Daniel Jones be able to maximize that? Who knows? Maybe I'm just being a prick, but I don't see it. But can I ask you? So what was the win total? It was 7.5?
7.5.
Where do you sit on that?
I think so. What was their record last year? It was
9.
Was it 8, 9, 9, and 8?
It was somewhere around there, but like, let's think about that. Like week 1, they go to Tennessee, they play the Titans, and the only reason they win that is because Dable has the biggest balls in town to really 2-point conversion at the very end of the game. Like there's so many games that they
week 2, Carolina probably should have beaten them or were close to beating them. That was another field goal within that game as well. So
right.
I had them probably going slightly under. I reckon around that 7 win sort of mark, just because there was so many close games last year. If they do take a step back, I would expect maybe a couple games that the close ones that they pulled out last year, in the same way that with like the Minnesota Vikings, how we were talking about on last week's show, they pulled out so many close victories.
Sure.
Generally, that's not a very sticky sort of stat, and that sort of regresses the following year. So I would sort of think maybe drop a game or two this year and finish around that 7-8 win mark. But I had them when I was doing some projections at about 7 wins.
Look, I'm looking at the winnable games. Okay, let's say the Cardinals, let's say the Raiders, maybe Seahawks, maybe Packers. I don't see them. I mean, they'll win a couple of games in their division, sure, but yeah, that's a tight line. Maybe Patriots at home. Yeah, okay.
But they're another team who if they come out this season and they win 10 games, I probably wouldn't. I'd be a little bit surprised, but not completely shocked because of Brian Daboll year 2. I think he's a really good coach. I like some of the changes they've made to that team. So it wouldn't surprise me, but I think they might take a slight step back this year.
Yeah.
So we'll leave the team that we think might be the division winner till last. We'll go to the Washington Commanders.
All right.
Their over-under win total is 6.5. So starting with Sam Howell at quarterback, it appears this year. What's your thoughts on the football team?
I like calling them the football team. You've caught me just slightly off guard because I was lining up. I'm going alphabetically, but here we are. That's all right. Look, I would have liked them to have finally sorted out their sort of quarterback issues that have been with them for a long time. They've always been a competitive team, and I think that a lot of people really respect that about them. They've got a good receiver class. They've got nice tight ends in Logan Thomas and John Bates as well. And the defense is good. What the hell is going to happen with Chase Young? He's in a contract year. We have absolutely no idea. He just sort of has not ever really panned out to what we wanted. I still really like Kendall Fuller as well. They've brought in Cody Barton from the Seahawks as one of their key middle linebackers. I'm not entirely sure about that. Like, he was fine on the Seahawks. He's not sort of like a plug and play guy though, which I'm looking at their depth chart at the moment. It looks like they've got him pinned that way. So we'll see. Emmanuel Forbes was a nice pick, and apparently I've been hearing some good things about him in training camp. He's a little bit undersized, so we'll see how that plays out. And those corners have always sort of been the backfield, what do we call it on the backfield? The
secondary.
Secondary, thank you again. Another week. It's it's kind of been a little bit of a problem creeping up on them over the years. But for the most part, I think that there's some winnable. I think they're a winnable team. I've got them at 7-10, going 3-3 in the division. So
they to me they were the hardest team for me to sort of to pick because that offensive line wasn't great
yeah,
last year, and their real big signing was Andrew Wiley. Now, Andrew Wiley's a nice player, but I don't know whether he's Andrew Wiley was good on the Chiefs. Will Andrew Wiley be good as in Washington? I'm not
yeah,
sure. Like that's they, as you said, Emmanuel Mosley, the skinniest cornerback guy. He was 166 pounds at the
Emmanuel Forbes.
Emmanuel Forbes, sorry.
Yeah.
Emmanuel Mosley, I was looking at something else at the time. But Emmanuel Forbes, but he was 166 pounds or something. That's a really skinny corner.
Right.
But I like you said, the receivers, McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, who I'm a big fan of. We'll see a bit of Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson. So it's all going to come down to Sam Howell. And as you said, so you've not only do you have Chase Young in a contract year, Montez Sweat's in a contract year. Montez Sweat's played better than Chase Young.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, probably their biggest improvement has actually been the hiring of Eric Bieniemy as offensive coordinator.
So you think that's a significant improvement?
Yes,
yeah.
Compared to I actually think Scott Turner, who was their OC, he was actually really quite good, and I just think it was one of those things that maybe they just needed to move on, because I also think the big thing too was Ron Rivera will be fighting to keep his job this year.
Yeah, will he?
Yeah, so because you've got the new ownership group now. They're not tied to Ron Rivera. They're not tied to pretty much anyone within this organization.
Yeah.
You've got the new ownership group, Ron Rivera. That's probably the reason why there was a lot of talk prior to the draft. A lot of people are expecting Chase Young to be moved. But if you're Ron Rivera, who could be on the hot seat, you're not going to be trading Chase Young because you want to keep your job.
Right.
So I was never expecting, as much as I would have loved to have seen Chase Young maybe move, and I would have loved to have seen him on my Carolina Panthers. That would have been incredible to have him opposite Brian Burns, but I never saw that actually being as a possibility, because I do think that Ron Rivera is on the hot seat, and that's why Eric Bieniemy is also picked with his jobs that he went to.
Yeah.
For the OC was Washington, because that he needed to get out from Andy Reid to show what he could do. But if Ron Rivera does end up, they underperform at the start of the year and they decide, the new ownership group decides to make a change, Eric Bieniemy is probably the most likely candidate to move to that head coach, and he can then audition for that role moving forward. So,
all right,
that's
not
just
considered that.
They're my hardest team to pick for this division, because I could see them ranging anywhere from about that 4 wins to probably about that 8 or 9, depending on how the rest of their defense plays.
And I'll tell you what, so week 1 against the Cardinals, they got the Cardinals coming to that town. That's going to be a really telling game. I don't think that that's a shoe-in for them to win. If they lose that, I think that could make a big stamp on the rest of their season. Now, teams will always turn around, of course, but hear this schedule out for the first 7 weeks. Cardinals, potential win. Broncos, Bills, Eagles, probably losses. So 1-3. Bears, Falcons, Giants. 3 very winnable games there. So 4-3 after going 1-3. It's not out of the question. I think winning 3 games in a row for a middle of the road NFL team is very challenging. Bears at home, on the road to Falcons in a dome, and then going to MetLife to play the Giants. I think that there's winnable games in there.
Yeah, and I know that you said, I'm a bit, and I know we're not on that division tonight at all, but I'm not sold on the Broncos. I don't know what that Broncos team's going to be. So, as you said,
quickly, the defense though,
well, that's the thing. The defense is good, but
yeah,
I'm
okay.
I'm not sold on them. And
get to them,
but as you said, if they do happen to beat that Cardinals team and that Broncos team isn't as good as what some people are expecting, if they happen to pull off those 2 wins, and then, as you said, they're 2-2 when they play the Bills and the Eagles or whatever, and then they come to that stretch of 3, If they win those three and they're suddenly 5-2, like that wouldn't shock me either.
Right. And that's
But,
I think it's within the range of possibilities. And yeah,
yeah,
that's why I'm a little bit more bullish. And when I say bullish, like I'm not like I'm not usually, like I said, 7-10. It's nothing to cry home about. I don't have them making the playoffs, but I also I don't mind them.
it's definitely, this is why to me this sometimes can be. I know some people have described it some years as the NFC least, but it can also be like the NFC beast sometimes. Like when you can see how competitive some of these teams can be, it's challenging. Now, speaking of competitive teams,
Yeah,
last year's Super Bowl losers, the Philadelphia Eagles, their over under win total is 11.5. Thoughts on that?
like I said before when I was talking about the Cowboys, I've got them going 13-4. And I think 4 losses is more than within the range of possibilities, and I think it's respectable for the Eagles. When I look at their team, and like that, they have not lost a lot. In fact, they've mostly retained all of their players. I know a lot of people are talking about how they lost CJ Gardner Johnson. He was great on the Eagles. And you can clip this. He was shithouse on the Saints. He was not a good player. That's why they let him go. I feel like players who go to the Eagles become better because they're surrounded by the people around them. And they've just managed, like Howie Roseman's just done such a good job of acquiring talent and acquiring people that are good for his scheme. And then they move on from them.
Mm. Yeah, and I think probably,
Reddick. Like,
yeah,
what are we talking here? Darius Slay from Detroit, like Terrell
yeah.
Atkins from Pitt. Every player wants to come to this defense and play. Like, it is
And
insane. And I haven't even talked about the offense yet, which is probably their most admirable part.
yeah, and I think when you look at it too, probably their actual biggest loss was Javon Hargrave leaving. Now he was a fantastic player, but they fueled that by maybe drafting the best player in this draft in Jalen Carter.
They are the definition of the meme. They can't keep getting away with this. Nolan
Yeah,
Smith and Jalen Carter. Are you kidding?
to pair Jalen Carter with Jordan Davis, Hassan Reddick, Brandon Graham on that defensive line. Like N'Kobe Dean's going to be stepping up to be a starter this year by the looks of, like you said, Bradbury, Slay. It's maybe the safeties might be something that, but you even see like they signed Miles Jack as well.
Yeah.
So they're just regenerating probably, and then when you go their running backs, they lose Miles Sanders to Carolina, but then they sign Rashad Penny.
Mm-hmm.
They trade for DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
They got Kenneth Gainwell there. You got Boston Scott, who's always going to pop up against the Giants and score two touchdowns. He does it every single time, but it feels like,
Yeah.
you've got these guys there. And even I really actually like, just for the cornerback depth in their signing, they signed Greedy Williams away from Cleveland, sorry.
Mm.
Just depth pieces. Bradbury,
Yeah.
Slay getting that bit older. But, maybe Greedy Williams could end up being like, because as we saw last year, they got that trade with CJ Gardner Johnson.
Like I was saying, like Greedy Williams could very much be this year's CJGJ. Like there's nothing stopping that from happening.
They're just loaded everywhere. And I mean, it's just as everyone sort of said, it's AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert it's just when you look around, it's all of that. And I think it's at the end of the day too, they've got maybe, well, I think personally, probably the best offensive line in the NFL.
Yeah.
You got Lane Johnson coming back. Kelsey's still there in the middle for another season. Jordan Mailata is now a top 5 left tackle in the NFL.
Yeah, like, I'm fine with that.
And they've still got Jalen Hurts. Like Jalen Hurts played incredible last year and almost got them that win in the Super Bowl. And to have bringing him back as well is just like, with that new confidence as well of going, okay, we got to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
We were this close. There was the holding penalty, which everyone talks about. We're a holding penalty away from maybe being Super Bowl champions.
Right.
At the end of the day, I think probably actually the biggest loss from this team is losing Shane Steichen.
Yeah, sure. And that's something we haven't touched on, is losing the offensive and defensive coordinators as well. So that'll be a real test of, like, because this is not the 49ers that we're talking about where, they just keep propping up talent wherever they can. It's like, what are we going to see this year out of them from Brian Johnson? And look, Sean Desai, obviously being a Seahawks fan, I'm very big on Sean Desai. And I've got pretty big expectations for him this year. I think he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, so I probably think at the moment I reckon Philly might be. I reckon they'll at least be in the championship game again. I'm not sure whether it'll be the Super Bowl, but I think they'll be in the NFC Championship game at least.
I'll give you 3 things that will stop them from winning the Super Bowl: a team in Kansas City, a team in Cincinnati, a team in Buffalo.
I would also say probably the 4th one is a quarterback injury.
Quarterback injury, and I was going to move on from this, but I'll bring it up now that we're talking about it. Marcus Mariota is not too far removed from last year's Gardner Minshew. And Tanner McKee was a good quarterback in Stanford. Now, I'm not saying he's a Super Bowl quarterback by any means, but I don't think that their drop-off is too severe there.
Well, Marcus Mariota didn't have a great year last year with Atlanta. He was pretty inaccurate, and I think it was Kyle Pitts. I think last year had the most uncatchable passes.
Yeah,
out of anyone in the NFL last year because of Mariota. Yeah, the big thing he had was in his Tennessee days was that that nerve injury to his elbow. So, if Jalen Hurts is out for a game, can you trust Mariota to perform like the way that they would be hoping for? But like you said, you got Tanner McKee there. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they somehow pluck another quarterback from obscurity before the season starts on cut down day, that they might be able to put someone else in if they needed. But
I mean, I think they're happy. Okay, let me just counterpoint you there. Would you rather Marcus Mariota or Dak Prescott? Dak? Would you rather Marcus Mariota as your quarterback or Sam Howell?
See, I don't know because we haven't seen it. Because the thing is, I've seen Mariota, but I haven't seen enough of Sam Howell to be able to answer. Do you know what I mean?
Would you rather Marcus Mariota or Jacoby Brissett?
Probably Jacoby Brissett.
That's fair. I probably would as well. Would you rather Marcus Mariota or Daniel Jones?
Probably Daniel Jones.
I'd rather Marcus Mariota. So what I'm saying there, though, is there's Jalen Hurts and there's Dak in this division, and then there's just a pool of players at quarterback.
Yeah, it's 2 elite guys, and then a swimming pool of we don't know /
of Jags,
middle class. We're not sure. So
some paid more than others.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So that's our NFC wrap up there. We'll move on to the AFC East. We will start with one of those teams that you just mentioned, that team in Buffalo. Their over-under total is 10.5 wins. So what is your thoughts on the Buffalo Bills?
When we were talking about the Ravens last week, I did say that I was very bullish and that for the most part for the rest of this, I am fairly chalky. I've got the Eagles winning the last division. I've got the Bills winning this division as well. I've got them going 13-4, and that's with pulling out 3-3 in the division. I just think for Buffalo last year, everything that could go wrong pretty much did go wrong for them. Before Josh Allen got injured and he had that injury to his elbow, was it? Or throwing arm, something like that. He was tearing teams up. He was playing so well. The defense did struggle to sort of keep up with the pace that he was playing at, and that was because, they lost Von Miller through the season. But I think bringing in Tre'Davious White from the Bears was what sort of kept them competitive throughout the year. I want to see Micah Hyde healthy. I want to see Kaiir Elam play, take that next step forward in defense. They've got Jordan Poyer will be back as well. I think DeMar Hamlin will be playing better. So all these guys, Taylor Rapp, they brought over from the Rams, they're loading up in this secondary. Daquan Jones from Carolina as well. Ed Oliver on this line. It's going to be good to watch. And then the receivers, they didn't really bring in too much help, but I think that year after year, they've looked at the Kansas City Chiefs and and keep getting belted by them. And they're like, that's it. We need our version of Travis Kelce. And they drafted Dalton Kincaid and they traded up for him. I'm into it. I wish that they would finally solve their issue at running back, because if you listen to the Athletic Football Show, the coaches series that Jordan Rodriguez did, just the play callers, just hearing what Sean McVay had to say about like if you want to be a competitive team, you need a solid run game. And I love that philosophy. Like, you don't need to pay the highest, best Christian McCaffrey, whatever player in the league, but you need to have a Todd Gurley sort of level, like solid player to be competitive. I don't think James Cook, Damian Harris, Latavius Murray is it personally, but we'll see. Hopefully Josh Allen doesn't just put it all on his back and carry the team.
Yeah, so they're obviously, by the sounds of it, they're banking on James Cook this year. He seemed, all the reports out from the coaches, they're expecting him to be a 3-down back. I mean, I can see it. Like, I could see, and I know a lot of people are saying,
sorry, just to cut you off. Tell me why you can see it. And I'm just, like, for me, I watched him a lot at Georgia, and I couldn't see it then outside of his pass catching ability. I didn't see it much last year. So, like, what am I missing, do you think?
So my thought was, like, it's really hard, because if you think back a few years ago to 2018, you think of that Georgia running back class, everyone was after Sony Michel. Sony Michel went in the first round. Nick Chubb went in the second round and has turned out to be...
We're about to start talking about LaShawn McCoy, but never mind, continue.
but so, like, Sony Michel was the guy that everyone was touting as... awesome. Nick Chubb turned out to be the far better running back, and it's become, like, I just feel like when you're at a team like Georgia, and we saw that with the defensive guys, you could say, like, I mean, you looked at the last couple of years at Quay Walker, Trayvon Walker, Jordan Davis, like Jalen Carter, they're talking about how these guys just get the best high school prospects, these teams. So therefore they have to rotate them through so they can give everyone their chance. I feel like if James Cook was on a different team, he would have been utilized in a different way. I have a feeling that they had their schemes last year. They're really now trying to focus a bit more on that running game. They're trying to take that ball out of Josh Allen's hands that little bit more. Brandon Beane's been pretty much pleading that, like, Josh, please stop running the ball so much and stop trying to collide into people. Like, just protect yourself that bit more. So, and I think too, I know coach speak sometimes can be, coming out of training camp, this guy's going to be a number one and this guy's going to be a number one. But the first preseason game, James Cook was the every down back. Like, they see him being that type of thing. And they've got Damian Harris. Damian Harris has been a good quality running back in the NFL.
I prefer Damian Harris. And this is what I'm saying is, so I think all of what you're saying is valid. And I just think too many people are going, Georgia Bulldogs, man, Todd Gurley, Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift. Like, of course. So it must be James Cook. And all I'm thinking is like, I watched James Cook at Georgia, and I see him more as a Kenny McIntosh than I do DeAndre Swift. So, like, and that's maybe just a me thing, and maybe I need to, like, let that go. But I've never seen him as that true RB1 kind of guy. Like, I've got this bet on my other show with my mate Jay, where he reckons James Cook's going to be like the next best thing since sliced bread, and I reckon he will be for the month of September. In fantasy, and then come October, I think we start to say goodbye to James Cook, and through November, and as it gets colder, I think Damian Harris and Latavius Murray, those bruisers who start to take over the job.
The thing that I think, though, is, as you were saying with Buffalo trying to have their own version of Kansas City, one of the best things about Kansas City is, they've got the running backs, right? So they've got these guys they can sub in and out whenever they need. But the thing that you could know when Sony Michel was on, like, I come back to Sony Michel, but the thing you knew about him when he was on the Patriots, he wasn't going to be throwing the ball. If he was in, it was going to be a run or a play action pass. It was never going to be, we're going to throw the ball 70, 80 times a season to Sony Michel.
Yeah, but that was more of an error in judgment from Bill Belichick, who was like, "You're my new LeGarrette Blount." It was like,
Yeah,
no, he's not. Sorry.
but I had the feeling though that if they peg James Cook as just the pass catching running back, every time he's out on the field, the defense it's going to tip off the defense. Like that, this is how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, yeah,
Is they're now trying to change the math on offense to go just because James Cook is out here doesn't mean that we're just going to look for him and he's going to get a catch with maybe 2 to 8 rushes per game and that's going to be it. I actually think they're trying to provide a bit more of that deception on offense by having guys like you said, because they've got Dalton Kincaid, who's more like probably a slot receiver than a tight end.
yeah,
But you can have him block in line. You can have Dawson Knox and move out to the slot. Like you can move these guys around.
yeah.
And I think that's what they're trying to do is they're trying to create that deception of going, we can't just guarantee that James Cook is going to be out here to catch passes if he's going to be running the ball. And that's why I think, too, then you might see a bit of a change for Damian Harris's role, where when he does come in, he might also catch a little bit more pass-wise or be targeted a little bit more to create that illusion of going, well, we can't guarantee that Damian Harris comes in, he's going to run the ball 20 times a game with one target. I think it's just going to be one of those things. It's going to help try and uplift that offense, try and get the ball out of Josh Allen's hands a bit more to try and protect him for when they need it in the playoffs. So that's my sort of thought process behind it.
Yeah, just the last thing. I'm so sad that Nyheim Hines won't be playing this season in Buffalo because I would have loved to have seen what they would have done with him on like pass catching, 2-minute drills, and special teams.
Yeah, and
I think it's a bigger loss than people make it out.
Yeah, and I think too that the Bills are going to have the heartwarming story this year with DeMar Hamlin coming back and playing again. Like it's incredible he's back playing after what happened to him at the end of last year. Yeah. Like I just, in a way, I do hope that they go a fair way, like maybe even go all the way.
I'd love that. Yeah,
just because that whole thing, he was a guy who almost died on the field.
Yeah.
And a few months later, he's back playing. Like it's just insane to see. And you just hope for, you could just for a story. It's almost like a movie. You want it to be like a movie.
Yeah.
Like the bad thing happens and now he comes back and it's uplifting and it brings this team together and they move on from there. So we'll move on to the other team who I think could potentially challenge for the division winner here, and that's the Miami Dolphins, whose over-under is 9.5 wins. So what is your thoughts on the Miami Dolphins over-under of 9.5?
9.5? So I didn't know which way you were going. I was like, are we about to talk about the Jets? Peek behind the curtain for the next team we're talking about. I've got the Jets and the Dolphins both at 11-6 wins. Now I've got the Dolphins at 4-2 in the division and the Jets at 3-3. Look, I love the Dolphins this season. I'm not going to be like, what's going to happen with Tua? Will he get another concussion? Is his career over? Of course, it's a possibility, but I'm not going to plan like that's the outcome here. I think if either you're going to fully prepare for that, and that's your perception of the Dolphins, or you're not going to at all. I feel like you can't just sort of be like half in, half out. I love the Dolphins this season. I love Tyreek Hill. I love Jalen Waddle, even though it's just those two guys who are going to be basically the offense. Maybe Cedric Wilson you could throw in there as well. There's not a huge amount of run game here in Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Devon Achane. They did bring in and Savon Ahmed, who I like, and Myles Gaskin. Those guys, they're all just kind of like guys. They're all good guys, good running back guys. Achane, of course, is fast, and they're going to blow the top off a lot of people here. And I think that that's kind of what they're going for. But I'm a big Tua guy. Even just Mike White, like in his first preseason game, I know he got picked off in the end zone eventually, but he put together some nice drives, which I was kind of happy to see as well. The loss of Jalen Ramsey, though, can't go understated.
Yeah, he's going to be their big loss. But when he comes back under this Vic Fangio system, because that's who their defensive coordinator they brought in this year is Vic Fangio, this defense could be scary good with what they could achieve under him. But also, too, I think one of the biggest underrated signings was bringing in David Long Jr.
Yeah,
to play linebacker. Like I really like him. I think in this system, mixed with their guys, they've got, like you said, your Jalen Phillips, You got these Bradley Chubb, like you've got
Yeah.
these guys who can, you know,
I really like Bradley Chubb.
yeah, I just like this defense overall, and I think when you bring Jalen Ramsey, and Jalen Ramsey's probably going to come in and play that star type of position, so like that, pretty similar to sort of what he did on the Rams in the last couple of seasons, be able to line up a bit more in the slot, play around a little bit more, like move around, just wreak havoc there. But I think too, the one thing I know you were saying about the running backs being just guys, but I think the thing that worked for them so well is the head coach and the offensive play caller in the madman Mike McDaniel. So
Yeah.
if anyone's listened to the Athletics play callers, like he was by Kyle Shanahan's side for pretty much his entire time as a coordinator. He was the guy who helped install these run plays and everything. He's just an absolute maniac. And I mean, you see when Raheem Mostert's healthy and he's been working with Mike McDaniel, he's racking up 200-yard games. He's just getting 6-7 yards a carry and he's one of the fastest players in the NFL. So if you add him,
And just to be clear, like Jeff Wilson, I have on my dynasty roster. I'm more than happy to start him week to week. I know this isn't a fantasy show, but I really like Jeff Wilson. I love that he came with Mike McDaniel from San Francisco. Like I do like these guys. There's just no like star kind of like Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill version of
yeah. And I think that's the thing when you've got a guy who's such a good play caller like he is, like that's just gonna make up for that star. And like you said, Jeff Wilson, when he played last season, when Raheem Mostert was hurt, like Jeff Wilson really stood out and was able to get that 5-6 yards a carry. Like Devon A-Chain, as we said, he's another guy. So this is just one of the fastest teams going around. But I think the biggest thing at the end of the day is you've got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as your two receivers. Good luck to any defense trying to cover these two guys.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, real quick. So we're both big fans of the Athletic Football Show. Last year, we would have listened to a lot of talk about Javon Holland and however, I think that there was a lot of talk that we were expecting him to take the step forward. I'm not sure that happened, right? Am I picking that up right?
Yeah, I think he had a good year, but not maybe to what was expected.
Yeah, in the level of like what AJ Terrell pulled out in his second year, and accept that as well. With that said, are we expecting Javon Holland to take that step forward this year in Jalen Ramsey's absence?
100%. I think it's all. I think he's going to cement himself this year as one of the best, brightest young defenders going around. I think his play with having a guy like Jalen Ramsey there, having a full off season with guys like Bradley Chubb, bringing them in, David Long Jr., like I said, improving this defense and then bringing in Vic Fangio as well.
Yeah.
To me, this just seems like he is poised to suddenly, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if come the end of the season, everyone sits back and goes, well, we know who the best, one of the best secondary players in the league is. It's Javon Holland. Like, that's not going to surprise me whatsoever if that happens. So I think this year we'll see the year of what, so as I said, I feel like Javon Holland had a pretty decent year last year.
Yeah,
wasn't up to the level as what everyone, like a Nate Tyson, Robert Mays and all that were sort of hoping for. But I think this year is going to be that year where he takes that leap and puts himself up into that upper echelon of players in that position, I feel.
Do you have any thoughts on bringing in Eli Apple for sort of as a replacement level for Jalen Ramsey?
Well, I don't think... I think it's at the end of the day, I just think it's one of those things that you got to have depth. Now, Eli Apple...
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I definitely understand.
Eli Apple is obviously nowhere near the talent level of Jalen Ramsey, and he's most notably seen as a meme by a lot of people whenever they show the Eli Apple getting burnt, and you see that picture of everyone like, oh, here's a live picture of Eli Apple, and it's a piece of burnt toast. I've seen that a lot on Twitter, but I think it's just a handy, just to have that body there to throw around, and that's where I think the Vic Fangio defense can come in so handy. Is I think Vic Fangio can hide some of these guys with his type of defense who aren't necessarily the greatest players, but are good. But I think he's really good at hiding them and putting them into to get the best potential out of these guys as what they can.
just finally looking at their schedule. So open with the Chargers, Patriots, Broncos, Bills, Giants, Panthers, and then they play the Eagles. And then the Patriots, Chiefs. If they can beat the Bills in week 4, and let's say like by some chance they beat the Chargers as well, which is possible in week 1, this is a team that could be going to Philadelphia as like a 5-1, 6-0 type team.
Mm.
That's going to be an epic blockbuster game. That is a primetime game as well. I'm seeing the time zone slot. I'm not sure what day of the week it is, but that's going to be, I'm going to pencil that one in the calendar.
Yeah, and I was just looking at like their draft, because not only did they bring in Devon A-Chain, but they also, in the 3rd round, they drafted Cam Smith, the DB out of South Carolina.
Yeah.
You know, that's another piece to bring in to try and just shore up that defensive backfield.
For a team that didn't have a lot of draft capital, they sure did manage to do a good job with it.
Yeah. That's just the thing. Like you're looking at their, I'm just trying to see if there's anyone else that's,
I hate that they got their 1st round pick taken from them.
Was that was in the...
That was for the owner got penalized for talking.
Oh, the Tom Brady, and that's right. And then they traded their other 1st round pick they got.
Yeah, and they
Bradley
got
Chubb.
the 49ers for the Trey Lance trade or something like that.
And that's what they then passed on to...
Yeah, and then they lost it.
Denver, and then Denver passed that on to New Orleans to get Sean Payton. So that's a well-traveled pick.
Oh, while we're talking about that, this is the last thing I'll say. So the 49ers out of that trade got Trey Lance. I was listening today. The Miami Dolphins got out of that trade Bradley Chubb, Tyreek Hill, and oh no, who was the 3rd person? I think it was Jalen Waddle, who they drafted.
Yeah.
Potentially. Would you rather Trey Lance or Bradley Chubb, Jalen Waddle? And
I'll take the other 3. Thank you.
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah, so that's the Dolphins. I've got them going over 9.5 as well. I think they'll be around that 10-11 win mark, and I think this could be it's so hard because the AFC's got so many stacked teams, but it wouldn't surprise me if you have 3 playoff teams from this division.
Yep.
So,
yep. I'm going to peek behind the curtain. Every team I've got here going over 500. So, yeah, that's what I think of this division.
With that, well, we'll move on to the New England Patriots. So New England, their over under is 7.5. I saw it as when I've written this down. So I would assume then, that's what I had it as.
It is heavily juiced the under, which I'm surprised because I've actually got them going 9 and 8, and maybe I'm a little bit keen, but that's also with them going 2 and 4 in the division. And to be honest, like I just can't rule out Bill Belichick at all, really. Like I think there's going to be a lot of really tight games here that they sneak out. They play the Raiders. I don't think it's going to be a repeat of what happened last year.
No, because Jacoby's on the other team. He's on the Raiders this year. So.
Exactly. Tough to start though. They start open with the Eagles. They play the Dolphins, the Jets. They could play the Cowboys. So look, I think they could start 0-4, but then I think they've got some pretty winnable games. They've got the Saints coming to Foxborough in week 5, and I think they could win that one. They play the Bills. I think that they could win at least one of these games against the Bills, against the Dolphins, against the Jets. I would not be surprised to play the Steelers, Chargers. Belichick always has a good time against the Chargers, so I don't mind the Patriots. I guess I'm bullish on the Patriots.
Yeah, see, I'm not so much. I'm not a huge fan of their wide receiver room. Juju was their big signing for the wide receiver.
Come on, you got to admit it's better than it has been.
It is, but it's still. I think actually their biggest upgrade for this season is going from Matt Patricia and Joe Judge to Bill O'Brien.
Yes, and that's also what I'm keen on.
But the thing that will be, I forget the big signing that's happened just this week was Ezekiel Elliott signing.
Yes, yeah.
So, that improves that run game. Well, that helps in that run game. And I think the thing is too, a lot of people would, why would New England sign this? Now, everyone knows that Zeke's best abilities is doing all those little things, the pass blocking, the being able to help on. And I mean, you've got Bill Belichick who absolutely loves all that sort of stuff. So of course that's, a signing that he would want. So, but yeah, I just think, it's not to me a team that
Yeah.
elicits a lot of,
Okay, but like
emotions for.
let's set aside the offense for a second. And having said that, like, okay, so their receivers are Devontae Parker, Tyquan Thornton, and Juju Smith Schuster. I actually personally think Kendrick Bourne's the best receiver out of all of them.
Kendrick Bourne, I really like. I
Yeah,
like Kendrick Bourne.
really like him. I won a lot of money from him 2 years ago on the Patriots. No one valued him. Keishon Butte, we'll see. Demario Douglas, he's playing well on special teams. Christian Gonzalez, like, let's talk about this defense. Christian Gonzalez has played a really, really fantastic week one game. And I know that the Texans offense is nothing to cry home about, but he played really, really well. Matthew Judon, still very, like, one of the better players on this defense as well. Lawrence Guy has come across, I think, has he come across this year from Baltimore? Or has he been around for a little?
He's been around.
Yeah.
I think their biggest one was drafting in the second round Keon White. He looked really good in that preseason game. I know it's preseason, but he's got that bit of juice that, to pair him with Judon, to have those two guys coming at you is, to me, is that's a really good line there to put some pressure on that quarterback.
Yeah, and for sure. And look, I'm a Seahawks fan, so obviously I hate the Patriots more than anyone. But Kyle Duggar, I think, is one of the most like fun players to watch. I'm so jealous that he's on the Patriots because he's one of the reasons that I look forward to watching him play when he's not in.
I actually really like a lot of their defense because, Josh Uche, I'm a fan of. Mate Mapu, who they drafted in the third round as well. He's having some incredible reports come out of camp. So I do think that the defense will be quite good. But to me, it's all going to come down to I'm not a big fan of their pass catchers. And have we seen the best of Mac Jones? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
If this is, because you saw last year, and I know he was injured and everything, but we all can remember back to that fact that he was out those couple games and they started Bailey Zappi. Mm-hmm. And then when Mac Jones came back in the game, they played him on that one series. He didn't do very well. The entire New England crowd was chanting for Bailey Zappi.
It was,
and it's just the weirdest thing. So
it was the first time in my entire life watching the NFL that I saw Bill Belichick tilting. Just this man who's just stone cold, never been fazed by anything in his life, and he actually like succumbed to peer pressure. It was amazing to watch.
And it seems like they've already moved on from Zappy Mania this year, and they're already on to Malik Cunningham. So watch out if Mac Jones doesn't play too well. Just wait for the Boo Birds in Boston to become.
I was going to say, what are you talking about? Mac Jones being the starter? Like Malik Cunningham's going to come in and they'll go 9-8 for sure. Especially behind this line. Like, okay, so like Trent Brown, nothing to cry home too much about, but Cole Strange, I think, will take a step forward this season. They've still got David Andrews as well, which we like. And Riley Reif from Chicago as well, previously in his day. So, like, I think the line is always good. Let's see what they can do with it.
And if there's an injury, as we saw last year, now that they've signed Zeke, they can have him play center as well, and he can play backup center for David Andrews if they need. Now, and on that note, we'll quickly move on to the New York Jets.
Yeah.
Probably everyone's Super Bowl favorite, it seems like, coming out of the AFC this year. Maybe not the Super Bowl favorite, but everyone's Super Bowl darling this year that could potentially play there. The Jets are over-under is 9.5. Now, you said you had the over for them, didn't you?
I did. I had them also at 11-5, but I had them 3-3 within the division. Look, the thing about the Jets is Aaron Rodgers, it is all going to live and die in Aaron Rodgers if he's committed to this team in the sense that he's still got it. He still wants to play. We're going to see Tom Brady out there. That'd be fantastic. Or are we going to see maybe like a Peyton Manning in his sort of like more twilight years? Now, he's got Garrett Wilson, one of the best receivers in the league, in my opinion, is going to be fantastic. Alan Lazard, Corey Davis, still really good. He's brought a bunch of people from Green Bay to play with him. And this run game, I loved this week again as well. Yesterday, bringing in Dalvin Cook to go with Breece Hall and Michael Carter, who I still think is very good, and even Israel Abandakanda has had a really good camp and preseason. So I don't actually have too many questions about this offense. Elijah Vera Tucker, Tyler Conklin, tight end with CJ Uzama. I also really like that as well. This is a good offense. What do you think?
I think the question's going to be about is that offensive line, because you look at it now, you've got Dwayne Brown is playing left tackle. Dwayne Brown's 38, 39 years old.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Mekhi Becton is playing right tackle. Robert Sala's come out. I'd read just actually before we started, Robert Sala said that his improvement will be when Mekhi Becton can play a game without asking to come out for a break. Now, that's not a good sign for your right tackle. If your coach is saying that, I just hope that he can play a game without asking for a breather.
I'm looking on our lads. He's player 2 at the right tackle position behind Max Mitchell at the moment.
Well, this is the thing. Like, and
they
actually, yeah. Well, this is one of the things that they're sort of talking about is Mekhi Becton. Yeah, he has played the least amount of games for a first round tackle. Now, if we go back to that 2020 draft, he was picked before Tristan Wirfs.
Yeah.
He was the second tackle actually taken that draft, I think. I reckon it was Andrew Thomas was first, and then he was the second one taken. And then Tristan Wirfs went, and I am blanking on who the other one was, but it was another really good tackle. He's playing for the Browns. I can't think of his name. Anyway, but so Mekhi Becton, it's the line. I mean, they've, as you said, they've brought in some of these receivers. They've shored up their defense by bringing in Chuck Clark from Baltimore. I like Chuck Clark. They've got that speed now on their offense as well by bringing in McCole Hardman, who I know a lot of people in the fantasy world are not sold on McCole Hardman, but I really think that
he's fine.
To me, their 3 receiver sets that I reckon that they should be utilizing more would be McCole Hardman, Garrett Wilson, and probably Alan Lazard, and then sprinkle in a bit of Corey Davis here and there between, just.
Oh, really? See, I think Corey Davis will be more of a feature guy.
See, I think he will be too, but if it was me personally, I'd probably try and get McCole Hardman in there a little bit more.
Yeah, sure.
Just because I think his speed could open it up for everyone else, but that's neither here nor there. But like you said, Dalvin
just quickly on the receivers, Jason Brownlee, watch out for him. If he makes the 53, I think he could be a good player.
Yeah, so there's that as well. As you said, Dalvin Cook to come in with Breece Hall, Michael Carter, Zonovan Knight, Bam Knight still there.
Yep.
So Izzy Abanikanda might not even make the roster.
Yeah, sure.
But that's potential. And I really like him. It sounds bad with the signing. I actually hope that he gets cut and gets picked up by another team where he's got more of a chance to shine, because I really liked him coming out of the draft.
Yeah.
Like, to me, he would be a guy who, not trying to be a homer, but he would be a really good guy that I'd like if he got cut, that got picked up by Carolina to back up Miles Sanders. Like, to me, him, Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders would be a really good running back, like a backfield there that I'd like. But at the end of the day, like you said, it's all going to come down to their offense with Aaron Rodgers. We saw that he played last year with a broken thumb for most of the year, so that you want to see an improvement from him. This defense is just stacked everywhere.
So I was going to say, so we haven't even touched on the defense, which is probably the feature of this team.
Because everyone's making a note how in last week they in the preseason game they played Carolina, made Carolina look foolish, 27-0. But you look at the guys they rested their starters, and you look at the guys who were playing. Jermaine Johnson, who was a first-round pick. Will McDonald, who's a first-round pick.
Yeah.
Bryce Huff, who's a really good player. Like, you look at these guys on that, they've got Quinnen Williams, Quincy Williams, who I really like. Then you look on the outside, you've got DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner.
Just quickly, DJ Reed, if you're listening to this, if you want to come back to Seattle, you can. You've got my approval. I miss him every day.
But that defense is just so good. Like, and you can tell that this is a Robert Saleh type of team, because coming from the 49ers when he moved over, and they just had, as we mentioned with the 49ers, and everyone's mentioned with the 49ers, they just had talent on talent on talent that you'd sit there and you think, oh, I get a break from the first string guys, and then the second string guys come in and they would be first stringers on nearly every other team in the NFL.
Sure.
And the Jets have gone and done that themselves now by stacking their team with these guys. And, it is like, who's gonna cost them games this year, if that makes it? Like, who's gonna lose them these games? Who's gonna make sure that they win these games and end up with that 11, 12 wins, sort of around that mark.
I was just looking at their schedule. It's not going to be easy for them, especially to start. Okay, so Bills, Cowboys, Patriots, Chiefs, Broncos, Eagles, and then they got the Giants, the Chargers, the Raiders. I mean, like those first 6 games, wow, they're going to be tough. Very tough. They do at some point play the Texans, they could win. The Commanders, they could win. Sorry, I mean the football team. The Raiders, Browns. So like there's winnable games in there, of course. But man, that first half of the season is going to be a gauntlet for them.
Yeah, and like I said, there's so many guys. I was just trying to look through their draft. Like, you know, they picked up Joe Tippmann, who you was looking at play. What's our lads got him start? Have they got him as the starter, or they got him
Number
as the backup?
2, they've got him. They've got still got Connor McGovern 1.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see a world in which Joe Tippmann is getting in there.
But they've just, you know, and they drafted Carter Warren in the 4th round as well. Like, but it's a lot of unknowns. It's going to be that offensive line is what's going to determine.
Yeah.
Because their solution last year was to move Elijah Vera Tucker, and he played tackle at some stage until he got hurt.
Right. And it's the injuries on the Jets is going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, exactly. So what we'll do is just give a quick recap. You had it was Philadelphia, Dallas.
Yeah, so for the NFC East, I've got Philly at 13-4. I've got Dallas at 11-6. I've got the football team at 7-10, and then the Giants at 4-13. But that's not probably true because I've got them 0-6 in the division. I think they'll win at least one there.
Yeah, I feel like they'll probably at least split one of those with Washington, I reckon.
Yeah, sure.
And then in the AFC East, you went
I had
Buffalo, Miami,
at 13-4, Dolphins at 11-6. I had the Jets at also 11-6, however, missing the playoffs. And I got the Patriots at 9-8. Maybe I need to do this again, readjust my expectations there. I don't see. Maybe they're not all 500 teams. I don't know. We'll see.
But I tried to do this yesterday, just going through the season and doing everything. Right. And then I sat there and I looked at one stage in the season, and I think it was about week 12, and I had about 5 teams that were 12-0, and I went, I might need to reassess this. So
yeah.
So that is our AFC NFC East preview, guys. Thank you again for anyone who has stuck around. If you have stuck around, please like and subscribe on YouTube. You can find us. You can find John on Twitter at John Lloyd Roberts. You can find me at BradBolt1 at NFL Lab Network if you're on there. Any parting words, John, before we get out of here for tonight?
No, that was it. Another great divisions to look at. I'm just excited to watch these teams in action.
And we will come back to you again next week. I reckon we will go with the South divisions, which are an interesting time in themselves.
Yeah,
that's just gonna be far more. God, that could go for about 4 hours, depending on how we get in on those teams. But thank you for everyone who's listening. As I said, please like and subscribe. Follow us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And until next week.
Welcome back to the lab.